I like the kind of the artists who have like brought that sort of punk energy, is the best way I could describe it, that kind of like revolutionary energy to their art as the best way to make sense of the world and change the world.
Hi everyone, I'm Ivana Lynch, and this is Just Beings, a weekly podcast where my co-host Melanie Joy and I have conversations with people who are working to create a better world for people, animals, and the planet. In each conversation, we explore the common psychology that drives all harmful and unjust behaviours. We also talk about how to shift our thinking so that we can help create a more compassionate and just world and improve our personal lives and relationships in the process. Our guest today is my good friend and one-time classmate in another world, in another lifetime. You perhaps know her best for her work as an actress playing Ginny Weasley in the Harry Potter films, but Bonnie Wright is so much more than that, and if you have not been following her as an activist, as a director, allow me to enlighten you. So since Harry Potter, Bonnie has stepped behind the camera, directing shorts, commercials, and music videos, including projects that have premiered at the Cannes and Tribeca film festivals. Her passion for storytelling has also led her to record several audiobooks. Bonnie is a passionate advocate for ocean health and its link to our own health. Her book, Go Gently, Actionable Steps to Nurture Yourself and the Planet, was published earlier this year and explores practical and tangible ways we can take action for our environment and community. She also launched a YouTube channel examining the same themes as the book in a more intimate and diaristic form. Bonnie is committed to using her platform to further her own education around climate and humanitarian issues and to communicate her findings in an engaging way to her followers. She is an ambassador with Greenpeace, Kiss the Ground, and the Rainforest Alliance. And she is just somebody personally who I've admired for many years for her grounded, level-headed mindset in a very bizarre industry, frankly. I'm talking about the entertainment industry. She's someone I would describe as very centered, very quietly assured of who she is, even in the most high-pressure environments, which is not an easy thing. It's something I struggle with, holding on to who I am in challenging situations. But what I love about Bonnie is that she takes this same groundedness into her activism, working on issues that are so big and complicated and urgent, but that demand a cool head and steady, consistent, positive action every day. She reminds me what it is not to deviate from one center, to put oneself in the eye of the storm, whether that be the media or a climate change conference, and to not be swayed and altered by the elements swirling around her. She's just a very inspiring woman, and she's a good person to listen to soak up her wisdom and that sense of inner stillness and power that she just has in such an incredible way. So I'm very honored to have her on the podcast, to have this conversation with her. So without further ado, here's my interview with Bonnie. So, Bonnie, it's been a little over 3 months since you published your book, Go Gently. And since we had that conversation when, this is for context listeners, we had a conversation when Bonnie launched her book, and it is now out in the world and it's been taking its own journey. And I'd love to know, how's it been? How's it been to see the reactions, and has it changed a lot about your life?
Yeah, it's interesting 3 months on. It feels like, honestly, longer ago the book came out. I think so much was happening in the lead up to the book. It's so that condensed energy when you sort of have the book tour and that adrenaline rushing through and that nervous energy you have, I think, before releasing this part of you out into the world. I feel like I was so nervous, like in the 2 days leading up to the publishing date. But the minute that day came around, I feel like been a continual nice release and letting go of the work, which has been really enjoyable, and even more so over the last 3 months. Just being able to, sometimes I forget that it's even there, and then sometimes I just think, oh, someone might be reading my book in this moment. And I think what's so lovely about the feeling now is I feel like, it can have a journey of its own that I don't need to kind of govern or control. Yeah, I guess you relinquish that kind of power over it, and you've done everything you can, and sort of you hope that it like takes its own journey. So it's been nice. Just trying to like force rest after that has been, after being just so intensely in that world over the last 2 years, it's been a nice calm time since then.
Nice. And has it been rewarding to see, I suppose, because your book is definitely, it's guiding people to make changes in their lives. Like, has it been rewarding to see people change their lifestyles and share how they're doing with it?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's that hard thing, sometimes, all we want, I think, when you create things and create stories, particularly ones that hope for action in them, you hope for that kind of conversation or feedback. And while I definitely have been getting that through, obviously the best and easiest way to get that is through social media and seeing people's comments back there, whether it's
Hmm.
on my Instagram or YouTube or different things. And it's been so lovely hearing that feedback in comments. But I think what I always often miss, I think, from those platforms is a real dialogue.
Sure.
I'm always thinking about how do I elevate that conversation like even deeper with people so that I do get a sense of more of a feedback and dialogue as people have been trying things out. Because I feel like people, me included, can learn so much from feedback and like how people have been implementing the changes.
Yeah. And well, speaking of that, what you learn from your, I suppose, your readers, I know we talked in the past about how writing books, how it changes you, how you affect it. What would you say you learned from writing a book?
Ooh, lots.
Yeah, a lot. It's not a simple question.
Yeah. So many different things. There was the sort of like discipline of writing, I think, and really collecting my thoughts. I've definitely been someone in the past when it comes to writing that has always struggled to sort of like piece the whole narrative together structurally. Like I can
Hmm.
ramble and ramble for hours on, 10-page description of something, but my struggle has always been like structuring something. So that was definitely helpful for me in the book, really even at the pitching stage to publishers, I'd already sort of blocked out the chapters, the kind of idea that obviously the book is go gently. So each chapter is go something, go learn, go make, etc. So that definitely really, really helped me to collect and organize my thoughts and see where I was kind of going, because that's something I usually struggle with. So I definitely got a little bit better at that. I think the discipline of, I think how, most of the work I've done since, in the kind of filmmaking that I've done myself has always been so self-governed by my own sort of time, which
Mm.
is a good and bad. Whereas this had the dates of, the manuscript dates. So that really helped me, I think, particularly during a time of kind of a weird 2 years as well in the world. Like that really helped me to have some, deadlines and disciplines. And it forced me to kind of get over myself. I think when often if I'm writing just on my own, I can really harbor on those kind of blocks and sort of dwell in them. Whereas when I had the deadlines, I had to sort of push past it and myself. And I think a lot of that was kind of an internal, maybe critique or, or something in me that was so scared of getting something wrong that I wouldn't keep going, but I had to keep going because
Right.
of deadlines. So I think, yeah, I guess overcame some fear, I guess, in the writing process. And I think surprised myself too, because I never thought I'd write a book. So it was a nice whole new part of my life that I definitely didn't sort of see coming. So I think I just evolved a lot. And I think even my tone in the book and my sort of messaging and my language I used in the book changed during the writing too. I think it like,
Really?
yeah, I mean, as the title kind of suggests, I almost like softened myself, I think, in the way that I was looking at the climate crisis and like attitude and my attitude towards it. There's always this obvious anger and frustration that we can have so much with this issue. And I can definitely have that. But I think the way that we look and approach it can't be black and white or right or wrong or good or bad. And I think while I believe that, I still think there was a part of me that did kind of look at things in a bit of a binary way sometimes, or think like we have to do this and there's no other way. I softened in my understanding. And I think the more knowledge I had around the subject, the more I realized it's so nuanced the way that we have, like every issue is so complex and nuanced that there is no right, correct way to address everything.
Wow. And so that's happened, I suppose, as you got deeper into the book, as you explored the issue, you start to feel like I don't have the answers. I have even less
Yeah.
answers. It just seemed to get more complicated, I suppose.
Yeah, which, obviously when you're writing a book, you think, oh gosh, am I just like confusing readers? Because I don't want to be like, oh, who knows what to do? I'm obviously deciding to write a book because I feel like I have something to say about the subject, or I'm privileged enough to have the platform where people will read this book. So it was always an interesting, yeah, kind of feeling when I was like, I guess I wanted to show that vulnerability, that things
Mm.
aren't so black and white and I don't have the answers. I just am passionate about the subject and this is how I feel about it. But I feel people are going to have maybe varying different sort of decisions. And particularly when the book is about suggesting actions that we can take. Obviously, everyone's capacity and access to do these actions can vary massively. That was always something I really wanted to be very sensitive towards and understanding of. I'm sure my editor was like, just tell people what to do. But I was like,
No, you absolutely can't. That's the point. But that's what we need in these spaces, like not just being told what to do, not answers, but like empowered with information and just like how you can make better choices for you. It's not going to be the same for everyone else. So I appreciate the nuance. And I also really just appreciate the, I suppose, the energy of the book, the slogan "Go gently." It's a very beautiful affirmation just to tell yourself, yes, in activism, yes, in changing, your lifestyle practices, but just in anything, like to slow down, go gently on yourself, go gently on the earth. I wondered, where did it come from for you? I mean, it almost sounds like it comes from a poem or something. Was it something that just occurred to you, or has it been a mantra for a while?
yeah, I don't really know when the exact moment hit for me, but it definitely came right at the beginning of the concept of the book. It wasn't like a later title. It really was the kind of thing that started the idea for the book.
Right.
I think it started as just gentle. And then I kind of wanted there to still be within the title this idea of action and doing something and being active. So the go, while together they seem more soft, to me, they seem hard and soft, that kind of go gently kind of thing. So yeah, I guess it came sort of early on and very much like a just moment of inspiration. And I then quite quickly too thought of that idea, like I was saying, the sort of chapters being go something else. The minute I think the title came, everything came together where, everything was just kind of these disparate ideas,
Sure.
things I'd been thinking of. And then I was like, oh, okay, this is what's the through line, I guess, was the tone. And it was always the language, because I felt that's what was missing for me when I read other books sometimes around this subject.
Right.
I was like, I lost the kind of humanism to it. I felt like it was just either you could read a book that was just on facts and figures, or you had books that kind of didn't bring enough of that in and were almost too
Unscientific.
yeah, exactly. So it was always the marriage of those two. And bringing in, I guess for me, it was also important to bring in that kind of, humanism, that mental health element to it, that kind of idea that if we don't sort of be gentle and love ourselves and our community, we can't really do much for kind of the wider world without having that sort of care, I guess.
Yeah. Wow. I really love the idea of yeah, the more you think about it, the more go gently. It's like it's invigorating but soothing. And that's what we need as activists. We need to be motivated into action, but then we need to also forgive ourselves and yeah, go gently. You say the whole phrase really makes me think of your great love, the ocean. It does. It has that parallel to a wave. It has that same quality. And that's something I really loved about your book, is that you started with this very pure, almost childlike, just love of the ocean. It's very simple. Before you became an actress, before you knew all this stuff, it was just something you loved. And yeah, I know you as somebody who grew up in the inner city, and I am really curious to know where this love and this connection with the ocean began.
Yeah, sure. I was very lucky. My parents had a little cottage on the south coast of England, and they still have it. So we always used to go there. Like you were saying, we grew up in the middle of London, right in the city, and on a Friday night after school, we would drive to the beach and spend the weekend there. And there was sort of nothing to do there but play in the sand and the sea. It was our moment for my brother and I's imagination, just to run wild and to be messy and playful. And I think it is that play element to me that brings up a lot. So it's just that pure joy for me. And I think because of that specific coastline, the tide goes, it's a really long sandy beach, and the tide goes out really far and comes in really high. And so there was this kind of massive change in one day that every day you could see in the landscape. And I think I really loved that as a child, because it wasn't still like a city can sometimes feel in that concrete kind of energy. It was kind of moving and changing. And I feel like that sort of tidal energy I was always very kind of like interested in. And a lot of my, obviously this is later on, but a lot of the stories I've written, fictional stories have been very much like based in very open landscapes. Like I've always been very inspired by open kind of spaces. I guess as a kind of juxtaposition to kind of growing up in a city of narrow streets. It's very different. So yeah, I was always loved coastal environments. And I think, if, I was already seeing, I guess I already picked up quite early on that there was more and more rubbish ending up on beaches. The erosion of the beach that I grew up going to was beginning to really change. They had to sort of like constantly be dropping pebbles and shingle and building seawalls, like all these things. And it is still very much threatened, that coastline, in terms of sea level rise, erosion. So I think I already felt like even the coastline itself could kind of disappear. And that's still a worry, for me. So yeah, I've always loved the sea, and I've always been very inspired by it and felt most creative. And I think also during school, I remember like all my major like revision times or big essays and different things like that. I always finished and wrote there, like, or like my dissertation thesis for my degree, like I wrote and finished in that little house on the beach. So yeah, I have a lot of like seminal kind of, I guess, moments for me there.
That's where you come back to you. I love that. Speaking, I suppose, of the anxiety you feel about the coastline being eroded, I mean, that is something I think activists have to manage. Your emotional life, your grief, your frustration, all that stuff, especially that comes with being a climate activist. And yet, what is so beautiful about your work, your activism, is that it comes out of love, and it's anchored in this pure vision to protect something you love. I wonder, how do you keep it that your activism is heart-centered and is done from love, and that you don't just get bogged down in all the anxiety, really?
Yeah, I mean, I think I definitely can and do. Like, there are definite days where you have to go there, I think, and allow yourself to be really upset and angry. I mean, I think like all things and feelings, there's like duality to them. Like in the love, there's the rage as well. And I think if you don't have that, then the love doesn't come as kind of flowingly either. Like I think obviously we are, activists within these spaces because we deeply care, and there is some anger and anxiety towards it too. But like you said, I guess the management of that, and or how do you just rechannel that energy, I think, reshift that and take it outside of yourself. Because I think for me, and I am not yet directly affected by the climate crisis. So when it comes to anxiety, my anxiety is about, it's not even about projected future anymore. It's obviously happening like already and now. But to me, it's always steeped in compassion because it's empathizing with those who are already bearing the brunt of the crisis. And that's not just humans, that's animals, plants, everything. So it always has come from a space of compassion because it isn't directly happening to me. So I think that's sort of how I always bring it back to sort of love. And I think for me, I'm always interested in community and care within community, I think. And times where I do have those bad days, like the best thing I can possibly do is reach out to a friend or kind of refocus my energy on effective community actions. Otherwise, it can be suddenly quite a lonely feeling.
Wow, community. That's always the answer I find when I talk to other activists. It's like, just go and have a chat. Just go and just do something like heartwarming and connecting. Yeah, that's really, that's nice to hear. Switching gears a little bit, let's talk about writing. This is a big part of, well, it's a big part of both of our lives, I suppose. Something about writing that I find is probably the hardest thing about writing is that as soon as you sit down to try and do it, your mind is like, gives you a million reasons why you don't need to write. And you've all the list of things that you should be doing instead. Did you struggle with this inner critic, and how did you overcome it? How do you overcome it?
Yeah, I think for me, when it comes to the inner critic with writing, it can be really in like short bouts of that. Like 1 minute I'm like in this deep flow, and that can only last for 30 minutes. And then like in comes a train of thoughts and I'm like completely sidetracked. So it can be sometimes very short lived. And I think I often have to remind myself that like those feelings are temporary and they will sort of go away. How quick they came in, hopefully they can like quickly kind of leave me as well.
Yeah.
otherwise, if I really stick onto it, which I can have days where I'm really stuck on that feeling of the inner critic, it can just like consume me. So trying to sort of like let it come
Mm.
in and out, I guess, in that sort of idea of meditation, of not like fighting the thought to like quiet down, but letting it come. And then actually before you know it, your brain has like kind of gone on to something else. I think the biggest thing that made me in this specific particular process with Go Gently, similar as I was saying before, when I had deadlines, it kind of like everything went out the window and I had to get over myself. And it was a really good thing.
Yeah, that's true.
And that was like, just made me realize how like conceptual thoughts are in your brain. And actually you can just kind of like get over them essentially. But it's always there. And I think you're going to have, like, we're all going to have those critics in our mind. I think it's just not good when I find myself seeing how it's like completely stopping or inhibiting the practice. And I think if it gets to the point where it's really hard that day, I honestly just, if I can and I don't have a deadline, I usually like to like realize that I need to just shift out of kind of outputting and writing, and I actually need to shift reading and absorbing and researching and sort of inputting energy and shift that and in order to sort of like get outside of myself.
Yeah, vary the day a bit. Yeah. That's so interesting. I mean, all that stuff about deadline, it's funny, isn't it, with creativity? Because it's like it's this very formless energy, and you're, as you say, you're trying to channel something that's wild and doesn't have edges, doesn't have structure, and you're trying to put it in a structure, and it's like when you put those restraints there, it's like it happens because it has to. I remember I had with my editor, I just didn't get a draft in on time, and I wrote this big long email about how emotionally I just wasn't ready, couldn't go through this, and her response was so funny. And it was the most long email. I should have been writing really rather than the email, and she just replied. She said, "Absolutely, I totally understand. I can see where you're coming from, but it needs to get done." That was it. It was like not even a conversation. It was like, oh, okay. I understand, but do it. It was great. I needed that. Same as you.
Yeah, and I think that structure, like we often like last probably had that at school when it was just like it was what it was, and there was no like, yeah, I think when you're in a class of people, you know, you didn't get just like special treatment because you didn't hand the essay on time. But you know, the older you
Oh,
get, the more
exactly.
specific your relationships are with people, and they aren't about a classroom of people, but you realize like, oh, I'm just like many different writers they have working on different manuscripts right now, and like they've committed to me writing this, I've committed back to them. It's like a
Yeah.
nice,
Yeah.
it's it realizes how much sometimes like, even though it's so solitary, there is a like the process of writing, there is a relationship the minute you are writing for someone else. And it's quite an interesting, it's an important thing to do, I think, because it takes a little bit of us outside of the process.
Totally. Yeah, and it's like, as you need the business of it as well, because it is a business when you come down to it. The books, they're products that they're trying to sell and shift, and when they have that and they have the numbers and the deadlines, it's like, oh, that's not what art is, but art needs that because otherwise it never gets done. It's just energy and expression.
Yeah,
Yeah.
or it never gets read, you know, it doesn't get out there. And
Yeah.
I think that's the most important thing you want for it to be read for someone you feel who falls upon it and needs it and loves it. So I think it's like when you're writing for readers or you're making a film for an audience, like we'd be silly if we pretended it wasn't for them, like it is for others in terms of a story shared, you know, rather than left on a hard drive.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have a daily writing routine? And are you still writing, or are you not?
Yeah, I'm working on another thing that has been kind of going for a long, long time. It was actually previously a script that I wrote like 5 years ago.
Oh, the film script about the climate crisis, and it was a horror movie.
Oh yeah, there's that. That is still a script, and that will hopefully be a film. And this is still about the climate as well. I essentially wrote it as a script, and it was like absolutely massive scale that would probably cost like 200 million pounds to make. So I was like, I can't write this as a script. No one would fund this film. So I realized, oh, I should maybe start writing it as a book, because then I have no creative boundaries and I can actually really go there. And it's more kind of sci-fi, science fiction, but related to the climate. So now I've been kind of changing it into a book idea, which has been
Oh,
really
wow.
fun because my imagination has no boundaries. Whereas before it was very just not really going where it needed to go. So that's been really fun. But my discipline with, daily writing practice, I don't think I really have one, in all honesty. It really depends. I think because writing is one thing I'm doing with other projects. The best thing I've got to know over time is hours of the day I feel most productive, and not getting angry in those moments I know aren't usually my best hours of the day. Like for me, I'm very awake in the morning and I usually have like a lot of ideas. And then I'll have that kind of middle of the day, late morning, middle of the day kind of slump.
Mm.
And I know in that moment, in those couple of hours, to sort of get away from my desk or shift to research or shift to something else. And then usually I kind of have more concentration by like 4 or 5 p.m. I guess I've just, however I feel those times kind of changes from day to day, but I know that my focus just massively changes, and just trying to, the minute I see it kind of not happening, like switch to something else. Otherwise I feel like I can waste hours just pushing words around a page and it's not really going anywhere.
Yeah.
Apart from those hours of the day, I don't really have much of a discipline. I mean, it's interesting, this project now, because there's no deadline, I'm just kind of developing it and working on my own, which has actually been quite nice, because I feel while I loved the deadlines of the book, they were very fast, and I'm finding I have a bit more freedom just to sort of figure it out on my own right now. It's not really ready to like
Put the pressure on. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and just feeling like a bit less, like I know this one's going to take a lot longer.
How good though to have that awareness though of, oh, this will take this long. Because I remember when I committed to a book and they're like, how long will it be? How many words? It was like, no idea. Be good if I get a book written at all. Like, let's not put. But that, like, it's cool how you learn those steps. I think it's really cool to hear that that's something you've learned about your process.
Yeah, and I definitely learned that I committed way too. Like I wrote like the first draft of my manuscript for Go Gently was like 6 months, and I was like, why did I agree to that? That was so fast.
Yeah.
Give myself some more time. It's a good thing.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, this is something we've sort of been talking about here, but one thing I'm always, I guess, struggling with balancing is the balance between art and activism. And, you started your career as an actor and, from a family of artists. And I always find like art is that thing that, nobody's telling you to do it. It's so arbitrary. It so comes from your soul. And at the same time, when you have a foot in the world of activism, there's all these very urgent causes that seem very pressing. How do you manage that balance between, showing up for your art and showing up for your activism?
I feel like there's always been activism within art, I guess, to me, in my understanding of like how revolutionary art was in culture, and how much it's like massively had the power to shift very kind of stuck kind of ideas within history, I guess. And I feel like I've
Mhm.
always seen art as like, I guess I like the kind of the artists who have like brought that sort of, I guess, punk energy is the best way I could describe it, that kind of like revolutionary energy to their art as the best way to make sense of the world and change the world. And for me, like I make sense of the things that I struggle to understand or I'm interested to understand further through the stuff I write. Like that's how I like
Mm.
work through stuff, in the same way you could like work through it. It's a kind of form of therapy, I guess,
Mm.
because it can help me to understand through character or not through character, like just stuff about the world. And in a way that is also connected to how I want to, or how I feel like the world should shift and change, or highlight which things, have injustices within them. So to me, they're always so directly related, the activism and art. Just
Wow.
like I say, in that sort of idea of like being this incredible, powerful tool to revolutionize like ideas that no longer serve people, and has been through time. And I think sometimes when you just do the art, you worry that there's so much like, or there can be naturally way more ego attached to that, because it's more about what you have to say and how you're saying it. Whereas like the activism can sort of broaden that like perspective, because it is about understanding other people and understanding other people's approaches to the issue. Like I think I've learned so much, if not everything, from how other people in their activism have looked at an issue differently to me or have experiences that are different to me. So I think it brings in the like humanism and bigger picture to the art that I think without it would be quite like ego driven and like lonely.
And I think all your art, the project you've told me about and the ones you're working on, it is all dealing with the stuff that you're preoccupied with in your real life. You know, I think people, I suppose we often think of like fiction and especially fantasy as an escape, but as you say, sometimes you're working out the answers to these big questions you have about life through the stories you write, through the fiction.
And I think that's the power of like fictional storytelling, or when you look at sort of sci-fi, fantasy, all those things, is the writer, author, filmmaker, whatever, is knowingly like suspending the audience into a state of full focus, that you have this amazing capability to like shift people's like maybe ideas about something that could be quite fixed, whether they don't agree
Yeah.
with climate crisis or whatever that could be. Like if you actually take them on a story that's about people and this totally other parallel world, even, you could suddenly like wire something that actually they come out of the
Yeah.
cinema or the book and they think differently, but they've been told less directly, which like more factual documentary is very much like, this is the facts, this is what you should feel.
Yeah, nobody comes out of watching Seaspiracy thinking they're going to eat more fish. Like, you know, those kind of documentaries. No, I think you've really woken something up in me there. Of like, that is why I love fiction and stories and all those things, because it is the only sort of media I consume where it doesn't feel like I'm being dictated to, where it's like you're being led into something, and yet you can have your perspective radically altered. Gosh, I thank you for that. You've made it clear for me there. Every time we do these chats, we do always have to throw in an obligatory Harry Potter question. I thought that's kind of what we're talking about here because okay, so we did both start our careers with Harry Potter, and that is a story, a series which had such a huge effect on so many people growing up. Like for me, it as much shaped me as well, almost as much as my parents did. It was like the values in those books. I wondered, having had the privilege as we both did to play a really strong character, a character who people look up to, do you ever feel pressure to live up to the ideals of the books or of that character? Or is it something you think about or have you managed to shake it off?
Yeah, it's a good question. I agree. I think obviously both of our characters, so many people really looked up to both of those characters, or they offered some one that they maybe hadn't been shown in other stories or in their life. Like they offered this other type of someone that is amazing to be and become. And I think for me, I mean, the biggest kind of, even when I was in those 10 years of playing Ginny, like they were the years where I was like, she's like amazing. I want to be more like her. And obviously, like actively wanted those lines to blur between the two characters because she was so
Oh,
well written and sort of, and I think her journey too was so interesting. And so I always have like admired and loved her. And I think definitely there's always a pressure in those. I think it obviously not when I was really young at the early stages because I was kind of not even aware of it. But as the book went on and the character became much more significant, it was scary and it was terrifying to do the character sort of justice. And I guess it's always a knowledge that it's an interpretation of a character that you have to be okay with. And I think now, obviously, as we continue to meet people that continue to love it or their whole new generation of fans, like it's like overwhelming and amazing when people share how much that character helped them or changed them or like they loved that character. But I think there is a definite separation for me because I have a love for her, that isn't to do with me, so like I have her on a bit of a pedestal like people do. So I think that's kind of nice that I can like see that as a separate character that I totally have gained from as much as other people when they share. But I don't think I'll ever or can ever shake any of the experience off. And I think that's what's been the nicest thing about the years since finishing is like almost developing a greater love for that 10 years and respect for it. Just realizing like it's amazing that it's shaped me and shaped like what I'm interested in doing and who I've become. Whereas I think obviously at that age you're so in your early 20s or like 20s, you're so about everything is about identity, I found. So you're trying to sort of shape who you are. And then I had this other big part of my identity. So it was a kind of an interesting experience to have when you're already kind of grappling with your identity, I think, outside of
Totally.
having this role. So
Yeah.
yeah, I love her, and I think I'm like feel privileged to have played someone who people loved so much.
I feel sort of the same way with, with my character, like of that same thing of I look up to her, and it was an honor to be around that and to have to sort of live in those stories, in those shoes. I just wanted to hear your perspective because you, me, Emma, Katie, we've all gone on to really center activism in our work, and it's only when somebody pointed it out to me, I was like, oh yeah, okay, I guess that is on, that's a distinct choice. It got me wondering, like, was it just being around those stories where the message was so, like, the themes were so strong? Friendship, the whole thing about doing what's right over what's easy, like the way the whole the Gryffindor house is celebrated as the best house. There was always like that, like, being brave, that was one of the most honorable qualities. And I guess I started to wonder, I was like, I wonder, was it just being around a story that had so much substance, that was so much about true heroism, not in the sense of having special powers or even magic, but about people being good and wanting to do the right thing. I just was like, it must have had an impact. It must have like gotten deep into us, our subconscious, where yeah, we like we got taken to activism.
Yeah, and I think there's so many things. I'm sure we had it within ourselves before we even got
Yeah.
cast, and I'm sure that's something we brought to each of our auditions. Like we must have had a part of that kind of come through that they saw in us, I do believe. And then I also think I agree, like being around those very strong themes, like to me, like the thing I loved like the most or felt even extra privileged to be a part of was the Weasley family, because I feel like they just me like present such amazing family kind of morals. And I think a very, with their secondhand hand me down everything, I think a very environmentally conscious family. I think also it's like you say, doing the right thing that's not easy, but also coming at it from not maybe the obvious like heroes kind of journey, but we were also slightly anti-hero type characters that came to the, like I often think about that in like the Dumbledore's army stuff, like how we all
Yeah.
kind of came together in this weird like mismatch of people with this want to like protect what we love, basically. Between also like Neville, Luna, and Ginny, like joining them at the Ministry, like I feel just such an odd bunch of people together, which I love. Not the obvious hero can come and step up to the task.
Yeah, it was a good upbringing. Thanks. Oh, I really enjoyed that little. Sorry, we've not really talked about that much before, but it was nice to talk about that with you. We don't have a whole lot of time, but I do want to get into the book a bit more before I finish up, because I'm sure a lot of people will have already read the book, and a lot of people maybe won't have. So, because you talked about the energy of go gently and everything, that the intention in the book. I always think with books, we often years later we don't remember the content, the plot, but we always remember the feeling that they gave us. And I think that's almost more important than the words. And obviously, tone is something that you have to think about a lot as an activist. Like, and I've seen a few activists speaking about that. Like some activists say, hope is irrelevant to this conversation. I saw Michaela Loach actually talking yesterday about how the whole doomism, climate doomism thing is a privilege that we can't afford to have. And I wondered, like, how did you strike that tone in your book, and what is the feeling you were trying to give and hope that people take away from it?
Yeah, I think it's a really important and interesting point. And, obviously, like Michaela was saying, in that idea, like, if we basically say, like, everything's gone to shit, there's no hope, like, there isn't any possibility of changing anything, that is very powerful, damaging language, I think, because it makes us think like everything's just like destroyed and ruined. And that's like to me very unfair, because it just completely disempowers the individual, and it makes all those people fighting for policy, good democracy, good grassroots movements, whatever that may be, just completely like, oh, it's just worthless anyway. And I think it
Mm.
is entirely overwhelming and scary and horrible, and it just has a very counterproductive effect. So I think the way I've always looked at things, which sometimes maybe can seem like too overly positive or unrealistic, is I do have to, for my own sanity and for just the message I want to give, is always looking towards our opportunity to do something. Like, I would prefer to lead this world knowing I tried than just being like, well, what's the point? Like, one action I do is not going to change anything. And for sure, I'm sure I could be proven that individual action doesn't mean anything, but it has to mean something. Otherwise, what's the point of even, like, that's even connected to our purpose of like being, essentially, being living, is the idea that we do mean something and we're not just kind of a number. And I think when it comes to structures that exist that do make you feel small, like capitalism or something, you can be like very angry about that system, or you can understand like, oh, actually, maybe the way I'm purchasing or buying or interacting with the energy of money and however that happens, maybe I can make it be more in line where I can with my values, and then that maybe can shift kind of data and different things like that. But I don't know, I think there can be days where like I am a bit like, yep, it's all right. We're like, we're what's the point kind of thing. But most of the time, I'm always looking towards like the creativity that lies in the solutions. And I do think there are so many solutions that exist. It's just about scaling them. It's not like needing to reinvent the wheel. Like, a lot of these things are being implemented on smaller scale or grassroots movements. It's just unfortunate reality of the kind of power and money and governance that needs to be put behind it that will really make a difference. So I think that's where it can get really frustrating for me, the idea that these things exist. It's just getting the right people behind them to implement them can be such a slow process. Like, I think, anyone's experience as an activist, if they've like done a work on around policy, you're like, oh my gosh, how is anyone like a politician? This is so slow, and like nothing is said, and everything's just like empty words. But you have to have that. Otherwise, if there isn't the policy around it, like, there are lots of individuals that can't make those changes in their life, or it's not going to happen at a scale we can do. So I do agree that some of that language can be kind of damaging and counterproductive. And I think it's better to empower people and to lean on that like more hopeful positivity. And I don't think we can afford to like use the scare tactic. Like, I don't think that's clearly worked in the past. Like, that's not going to work now.
No, it's true. To go back to your book, you very clearly outlined the problem, but you empower people with what they can do, and it's hopeful, but it's realistic too. I felt very uplifted from reading it, and I have to say it's not a book I've left. It's stayed with me, and it's helping me constantly question everything more than anything else. It's not like it solved everything, but it changed my outlook, and that's what I want from books. I want books to make me see the world in a different way. And the sun has come out, and that's quite a lovely note.
Yeah, and I think that was my main goal, to empower people to make the decision for themselves on how best to implement this. And the biggest thing we do is just diving that bit deeper into those questions, and seeing where maybe we've been programmed societally, or just because it's convenient, and we're like, oh, actually, maybe I could just address this a little differently. Yeah, that is my dream and hope, that it just enables people to make the decisions that best suits their life on their own. But it's just, a series of what ifs and questions, and some information to help people in that same way that, any nonprofit or any policy or all these things, if they're being implemented for communities or other countries, we can't go in and assume what their needs are without them deciding what their needs are. And that has been an older model of like aid, for instance. And that's, just coming in here and giving, starving, poverty-stricken people something that actually is not what they need. And I think that is the same when you look at, I would never want to just come in and be like, do this, and if you don't do that, you're a terrible human being. It's more just giving room for people to make it their own, their activism their own, so that it can be sustained over time and it's realistic.
Well, this has been a lovely conversation, Bonnie. Thank you. So, gosh, I can't believe I only got through about half of my questions. But before you go, I would just like to ask, So Go Gently, you have the book and you have this amazing YouTube channel, which I absolutely love. I watch all the videos. It's very it's so calming and inspiring. It's just the perfect balance. And you've got a really engaged community, which is, it's just so nice to see that so many people are taking this up and they're sort of nurturing this genuine passion for it. I wonder, is that something you're planning to expand and continue, or are you going to leave and just go on to do other books?
Yeah, well, first, thanks for watching my YouTube videos. I've really loved making those. I guess marrying that kind of love of like home videos and making films with the subject matter, and kind of getting back in front of the camera for that, which obviously I've been very much behind the camera for a long time. So that's been really fun. And yeah, my plan is to just really keep the Go Gently sort of platforms going. I mean, I was doing like 2 videos a month, but now I'm just doing 1 video a month just for my capacity of creating stuff. But I really loved, just continuing the story and the narrative in ways that I know that a book couldn't do. Like some things videos just can achieve that maybe a book can't do, and then something that a blog piece could do. Like I love the idea of like playing and shifting between the mediums. I'm really enjoying. So I'm going to continue with the YouTube channel, continue with the Go Gently Instagram of sharing content. And I'm hoping that next year I'm going to be making basically more of a kind of episodic, like documentary series that's going to be around similar themes of Go Gently. And it's going to be sort of a bit like how I have the interviews in the book, where I'm going and talking to different people who related to the climate crisis, and looking at really how every individual has a different kind of relationship and way that they're working in the movement. So the show will be very much about other people and about going to meet other people working in solutions around the climate crisis, and very much trying to lean into that same kind of positive, kind of practical way that we can engage with the issue, and bringing in, the people to the story. So hopefully I'll be making that next year.
Oh my gosh, that's so exciting. Kind of leading on from, we both recently appeared in the documentary, a travel series. Oh, I would love to see that. So yes, please make that.
Yeah, I hope so.
Amazing. My brain's a bit dizzy from all the things you're currently working on. As I know from your book, you're very organized. You're a great list maker, so I'm sure you will do them all.
I do love a list, yeah. I'm sure I'll make one right after this call.
Oh, good. Thanks, Bonnie.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the Just Beings podcast with me, Ivana Lynch. To find out more about Bonnie's work, you can check out the show notes or visit our website at justbeingspodcast.com. On Just Beings, we explore ways to change our thinking to improve our world and our lives. But we're not perfectionistic. We recognize that we've inherited a messy world, and that we're all just beings who are doing what we can to try to be more just. This is actually the final episode of season 1 of Just Beings, and my co-host Melanie and I have absolutely loved sharing the conversations we've had with you all. We'll be back soon with a new season of the show. However, in the meantime, we encourage you to subscribe so that you're first to hear when new episodes are available. And as always, we'd love it if you could help spread the word by leaving us a review and recommending the show to anyone you think might be interested. You can also join the conversation on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter by following us at Just Beings Pod. That's it from us for now, and we look forward to seeing you for season 2.